Live television continues here on Newsmax TV, and let us continue our conversation now. Matt Towery has been with us from Atlanta. We are going to add the voice, the reason, the experience of author and presidential historian Craig Shirley, joining us tonight from Northern Virginia. Craig, of course, the author of Last Act, the final years and emerging legacy of Ronald Reagan. And we're going to get back to some of your calls as well at 1-877-Newsmax. That's 1-877-639-7629. Craig, as we welcome you in, there is something worth discussing, and that is this third-party run by Gary Johnson. Now, it's the presumption he will again get the Libertarian nomination. He has added Bill Weld, the former Massachusetts governor, to his ticket, both of them former Republicans. And for his part, Gary Johnson was on the hard line here on Newsmax TV a couple of weeks ago discussing his candidacy. Let's look and listen to what the former New Mexico governor had to say.
The media should be giving some attention to, in my particular case, and I am seeking the Libertarian nomination, but in my particular case, look, I was a two-term former governor of New Mexico. I think I do have some credibility.
I remember he was a good governor of New Mexico. Now, later, he's kind of gone into the investing in the whole cannabis thing. Right. But the appeal of Gary Johnson, do you expect the Koch brothers and the big money and the never Trumpers to show up and put money behind Gary Johnson and the Libertarians this time around?
Well, that's an interesting question, JD. I think that they're looking at it. I would suspect they're looking at it. I would suspect they're thinking about it. The only problem with Gary Johnson is that he was a very good governor in New Mexico, but as a national candidate, he's quite frankly not very interesting or very exciting, and he seems to be making the centerpiece of his campaign the national legalization of marijuana, which is definitely a left-wing issue, and which means he threatens Hillary more than he threatens Donald Trump. So it remains to be seen. My guess is that third-party candidates traditionally take kind of a little bit from both. You know, it's an overstatement to say that John Anderson took a lot of votes from Jimmy Carter in 1980. Actually, he took almost proportionally from Reagan and from Carter. So it remains to be seen. I don't think in the end he's going to be much of a factor, at least in a sense, electoral sense.
Well, let me get Matt Towery's thoughts on this, because, you know, Trump has made a big deal saying that he thought he could coax in some of the Sanders voters. But would a Gary Johnson or a Johnson-Weld ticket kind of pro-cannabis thing get all of the Sanders folks and the libertarian-leaning Republicans?
Well, I think Craig's observation about how there usually is about an even split when you have these third-party candidates is correct. I don't think, even with cannabis involved, that you'd have some massive movement one way or another. What I do think is interesting, though, is that I cannot imagine that these groups that give these massive amounts of money with the sophistication that they have, with the polling resources they have, are still talking about a third-party candidate. It is just absolutely ludicrous, as I said, to look at the Real Clear Politics average and see Donald Trump doing better than Romney, doing better than McCain at this point, and considering the fact that we have such a strong Democrat in Hillary Clinton, I can't believe these people are even talking about it. They look like they're from another planet.
Yeah, you would think they would remember recent history and just what has gone on with Clinton Inc., I guess we could call it. There's something else outrageous with Bill Weld that I want to get to in a second, but let me bring on a caller at 1-877-Newsmax. I promised a viewer from Washington State, and John is on the line from Wenatchee, Washington. Welcome, John.
Hi, JD. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet. Good to have you calling from Washington State. What's happening out there?
Well, I couldn't resist. I called in because I don't put a lot of stock in these polls. That they're a moving target all the time, and so everybody's idea changes from day to day. Even. But I did want to tell you one thing that I thought might be a good idea for Donald Trump.
Okay.
And that's the governor of Arizona. Excuse me, governor of Texas. The governor of Texas was on one of your programs. I watch them all every evening. And he was a Cruz supporter.
Right.
But he said he will now support Trump.
Yep, and Rick Perry has a solid record of economic accomplishment in the Lone Star State.
After listening to that guy, I thought, what a great vice president he would make.
The only thing is, and again, and it'd be interesting, let me talk to Craig Shirley about this one. You know, pride goeth before a fall, but I think Republicans are counting on Texas remaining in the GOP column. Is it up for grabs? What do you think of what our friend John is suggesting in terms of the ticket?
Texas has gone Republican in every election since 1976, when it very, very narrowly went for Jimmy Carter over Gerald Ford. I would expect if the Republicans think Texas is in danger, then the whole country's in danger. They're in danger of in many states. I would think that, they're going to have to do their due diligence. Obviously, the demographics have changed in Texas over the years. They have a heavier Hispanic population, so that they're going to still have to work to win it. But I would guess that in the final analysis, Texas remains in the Republican column.
All right. Well, John, it's an intriguing pick, and obviously Rick Perry has done great things as governor of the Lone Star State. John, thanks for checking in from Washington State tonight. Now, as promised, William Weld, going on this ticket with Gary Johnson, first of all, it's still up for grabs, but Weld is such an open borders enthusiast. He has doubled down on Donald Trump stopping illegal immigration, comparing it to the Kristallnacht in Nazi Germany. Listen to Bill Weld here.
If we don't remember, we absolutely will forget. And you got to forget a lot of things to think it's a good idea to round up and deport 11 million people living peaceably, most of them working in America in the middle of the night. No, not the United States. China maybe, not the United States.
Gee, he forgets that moderate Republican by the name of Dwight David Eisenhower, Matt Towery.
Well, Weld was someone that Republicans were very enthusiastic about many years ago, when it seemed a miracle someone could be governor of Massachusetts. Of course, then you had Romney, but he's just floating out there in another world right now. We're going to be just as polarized as we always are by the time we get to November. The sides are going to be picked. As I said, Hillary Clinton is a very strong candidate, so Republicans can't discount her at all. Donald Trump is as our friend that Craig knows well, Newt Gingrich might call it the new paradigm. He's a completely new concept in political presidential campaigns, so I don't know what to expect in November from him. But I expect this will be very tight, and in the end, Bill Weld and the like really won't have a big impact on the race.
Let's get back to the phones. A state I used to represent in the Congress. From Arizona, I believe from Toback, Arizona. Joe is on the line. Joe, welcome to Newsmax Prime.
Thank you very much for taking my call. And I'm an NRA instructor for home safety, home protection, shotgun, handgun, and rifle. I teach people. There's so many people coming across the border right now, and I figure there's thousands of the ISIS in here already. And during World War II, didn't we gather up all the Japanese and put them all in concentration camps?
Yeah, well, that was detention camps. They were not concentration camps, and yet it is something that you look at. Others suggested in the wake of 9/11 that was something viable. I think it's far more viable, Joe, to seal our borders and to place a moratorium on illegal immigration. But as you call from Arizona and a border state, what you have to say stands in stark contrast to the likes of Bill Weld, comparing Donald Trump to Nazis and another World War II parallel. Craig Shirley, give us some historical perspective on what has transpired and what may transpire ahead. Is this a Weld comment? And quite frankly, what Glenn had to suggest from the past, something that is malodorous, odoriferous, and otherwise stinky?
Yeah, well, this is the 21st century, and the idea of rounding up people now and putting them into internment camps is just not politically correct, politically viable, or even acceptable. I do think that obviously something's got to be done about the border. That's my own personal opinion. I think Weld, again, sounding like a liberal on the border. Again, this is that if you're going to have a third-party candidacy, is that this is a Republican dream. You've got a presidential candidate who's advocating nationwide legalization of marijuana, and a vice presidential candidate who's advocating open borders and making harebrained comments about Kristallnacht and border security. is that they are more of a threat to Hillary and the Democratic Party than they are to Donald Trump and the Republican Party.
Let me get a quick comment from Matt Towery. Lightning round, Matt. 2 names, 20 seconds, spend 10 on each. Bob Corker meeting with Donald Trump today. Anything to that about Vice President?
Don't know, but it would bring a lot of his Senate colleagues around very quickly, and he certainly has a solid record.
Well, I don't know. He carved out that whole thing, he and Lindsey Graham, to stay away from a treaty with the Iranians. I don't know if that's much of a political issue. The other news development, we'll bring you guys back later on. Terry McAuliffe, the governor of Virginia, now under investigation by the FBI. Gents, we thank you for your time. There's